The moment the supports of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore were hit by a massive container ship, its fate was cast. Going, gone. The landmark structure collapsed into the Patapsco River, taking with it 6 maintenance workers. The vivid images of the ship striking the pylon and the bridge collapsing like a pack of cards has drawn global attention to the infrastructure crisis in the United States. Even though the Interstate 895 bridge over Baltimore Harbor was in satisfactory condition before the accident, thousands of bridges across the United States are in a much worse state of repair. More than 42,000 bridges in the country are described as in poor condition, with problems involving vital structural components such as aging piers and beams. According to the federal government, the substandard bridges carry about 167 million vehicles each day. The drivers of the 30,000 vehicles that used the Francis Scott Key Bridge daily will have to find an alternative route over the Patapsco River at a cost of time and money. Shipments into and out of the Port of Baltimore have been halted, forcing businesses to find alternatives. An accurate economic cost of the destruction of the Francis Scott Key Bridge is probably incalculable. However, federal and state Maryland officials have estimated that just the port's closure will cost the local economy $15 million daily. 15,000 people work directly for the port, and another 140,000 depend on port activity. All of these will suffer some economic effects due to the port's closure. Lloyd's insurance market in London expects a multi-billion-dollar claim and says the bridge collapse could become the single largest marine loss in history. Structural engineers say the cost of replacing the bridge could be anything between $500 million to $1 billion. And a new bridge isn't likely to be open to traffic before the end of the decade. Although the Francis Scott Key Bridge is probably an exception, all across the United States, bridges are in dire need of repair and maintenance. The U.S. federal government runs a national bridge inventory which lists 621,000 bridges over 20 feet long. Inspectors rate bridges on a scale of 0 to 9. Above 7, a bridge is considered good. A score below 4 for any bridge component is considered poor. 42,400 bridges fall into this category. On average, they're about 70 years old and were built just after the Second World War. 4 out of 5 bridges in poor condition have significant problems with the legs holding them up or the supporting superstructure. What is also concerning is that almost 16,000 of the poor bridges were listed in poor shape a decade ago. Since 1960, around the world, 36 major bridge collapses have occurred due to ship or barge collision like that in Baltimore. Half of these happened in the United States. Unfortunately, deficient bridges do collapse, although it is another rare event. For instance, the collapse of the Fern Hollow Creek Bridge in Pittsburgh in January 2022. The subsequent investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board found the steel legs of the bridge were severely corroded. Bridge inspectors had failed to calculate the scale of the issue, and despite a series of recommendations, the city had failed to follow up. When adopting the report on this bridge's collapse, NTSB member Michael Graham hit the nail on the head.
This bridge didn't collapse just by an act of God. It collapsed because of a lack of maintenance and repair.
And that is the sword of Damocles hanging over thousands of bridges in poor condition across the United States. A bridge closure or collapse can significantly impact the economy and have considerable financial consequences for people who use it regularly.
We have so many different kinds of little rivers and bayous and lakes and creeks. In Mississippi, it is unreal. We have over 5,000 plus bridges when we look at the whole system. And many of those bridges are in bad shape because of what's referred to as timber piling. And timber piling is the old way of building bridges.
There had been an order to the Department of Transportation to close those bridges. It was time to make a tough but dramatic decision. You can only imagine the results of that. Our farmers, those in the timber industry, those in manufacturing, responded negatively, let's say, and had a lot of work to do. We had to bring those organizations in, the boards of supervisors, and explain to them we didn't have much of a choice.
With the number of farmers that we have who have to move their products from the field, when we go in and post the bridge and downgrade the weights on that particular bridge, it means that farmer's going to have to go miles and miles around.
I could not live as governor knowing that a school bus might be crossing one of these bridges, knowing they were substandard, knowing that they should be closed, and seeing it collapse and take the lives of those children.
Now this school bus has to go miles out of the way. That's unfortunate for that school child. But in addition to that, we have an emergency situation where our first responders, like ambulance and fire engines, who needs to get to your home, and your home is on the other side of a bridge that's been posted. An ambulance has to go 10 miles or 10 minutes out of the way. It could mean your life or death.
Before U.S. government infrastructure aid became available, Mississippi created its own emergency fund for bridge replacement and repairs. $250 million was made available to improve the safety of the state's bridges.
The deck was put in place, so it's much smoother and it's consistent. It's not prefabbed or preformed. Much nicer bridge. It's wider, so it can you're not coming in tight when you're passing another vehicle. This was part of the Emergency Road and Bridge Program. The project, I think, from that end all the way down with the other bridge was about $900,000.
You know, infrastructure is always talked about in relationship to economic development. How do you get goods and services and products to market? But it's more than that. It is the lives of the motoring public.
A massive infrastructure bill signed into law by President Joe Biden in 2021 directed $40 billion to bridges over 5 years, the largest dedicated bridge investment in decades.
Across our country right now, there are 45,000 bridges, 45,000, that are in poor condition. We're seeing photos of some of them behind me in all 50 states. And I've had a chance to see some of them myself as I've traveled the country. But about 2/3 of the bridges in need of repair in this country are considered what they call off-system, because they're not directly connected to the interstate highway system. These are the bridges that are often overlooked when decisions are being made, but they are essential for small towns, rural towns, farmers to get their products to market, small businesses to be able to serve customers. These are the bridges that, when they're closed, shut off deliveries and routes to school, work, and home. They create longer delays for first responders when every second counts. So we've included $27.5 billion for smaller bridges, including dedicated funding for those off-system bridges I just described. And because maintaining these bridges is often the responsibility of counties or towns whose budgets are stretched thin already, we decided to get rid of the requirement that counties or towns share in the cost. The federal government is going to pay for 100% of the cost for repairing these small bridges.
It sounds like a lot of money, but it's just a drop in the ocean. According to the American Road and Transport Builders Association, the bill to repair all of America's bridges would top $319 billion. To put that into some context, that's about half the revenue state and local governments in all 50 states get from property taxes in a year. And the Transport Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, says the bottom line is America's bridges need a lot of work. Work that will certainly take years, maybe decades, to make good.
Remember to hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to stay updated with our latest content. And while you're here, why not check out another one of our exciting videos? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.